Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thanks so much for joining in our session today. It's the third day of the Gobeshona conference, and today is our session is on how can we build back better with nature, understanding the economic recovery potential of nature-based solutions. In our session today, we have a diverse group of panelists from Bangladesh and Peru, and we are very excited to listen to their insights on the topic that we have highlighted. For this session today, we have Alexandra Chosho, who is the researcher based in Nature-Based Solutions Initiative at the University of Oxford. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Alex to keep us going with the session. Just before that, we have the chat box open for all the participants to engage with us. So feel free to drop any chat or any question whenever you feel like to do so, and we will try to address this throughout our session. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Tasvia. I hope you can hear me well. So welcome everyone. What I'll do is I'll give a brief introduction to frame the discussion. I'll introduce the goal of the session, and then we'll follow with contributions from each of the panelists from their diverse set of perspectives across different scales and different contexts. And I'll let the participants, the panelists, introduce themselves when they speak, and then we'll have a discussion with hopefully some questions from the audience, and we'll hopefully have a lively and insightful discussion. So very briefly, I'll just set the scene. So we know that in 2020, 2 years ago now, exactly 2 years ago actually, there was a set of converging global crises. The COVID-19 pandemic crippled global health systems and economies, precipitating lockdowns and a global economic recession. And simultaneously, this is happening when we have a converging climate and biodiversity crises. This is becoming more obvious. So what this leads to is an increasing focus on investments in nature, specifically via nature-based solutions to address social, economic, and environmental challenges. So nature-based solutions through the protection, the restoration, the management, or the creation of ecosystems can address a broad array of societal challenges like climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, or improving mental and physical health. And we know that for some outcomes and types of interventions, the evidence base is quite robust. So there's a global analysis recently which demonstrates that native forests outperform plantations for carbon storage, water provisioning, soil erosion and control, and biodiversity. And there is also increasing evidence that nature-based solutions can support economic recoveries through, for instance, providing strong employment gains. But however, even though many nations are currently investing significantly in economic recovery packages, there is little investment in nature. It's only about 3% of the recovery spending that is going towards nature. So the goal of this session here is to discuss what building back better should mean post-COVID, and what the role of nature-based solutions is, or more broadly speaking, investments in nature. What role do they have to play in supporting economic recoveries? And this is particularly timely given the ongoing negotiations around the global biodiversity framework, including how to mobilize finance for biodiversity. So without further ado, I will let the participants speak. Please state your name, your role, and the organization you work. And again, we're going to start from the local scale and move up to the national and global scale. So I believe first up, we have Fariduddin Ahmed, and then we'll Yes, we'll have presentations from both Bangladesh and Peru. Okay, I'm Farid. It's your turn to speak now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexander. This is Fariduddin Ahmed. I am from Arannok Foundation. It's also called Bangladesh Tropical Forest Conservation Foundation. I am senior forest management specialist in that organization. Arannok Foundation had been working in throughout Bangladesh, I would say, but I am going to present something that we have done in Chittagong Hill Tracts. This is we have 10% of our land under Chittagong Hill Tracts. There are hills, and we worked in 3 different kinds of hills. One is completely denuded. We try to restore that with agroforestry as well as forestry approaches. Second one is a community conserved area in Chittagong Hill Tracts. It's mainly there are 11 ethnic communities, and they have been conserving some forest for their own sustenance. So we were supporting or helping them in restoring those forests. And third category is the land which was under the under district administration, under government or forest department. We also tried to help them. I'm going to narrate some of our activities mainly on community conserved area and degraded forest. In degraded forest, actually, it was completely denuded. People have been trying to practice shifting cultivation, which became unproductive because of the increase in population and shallow gap or narrow gap between 2 successive production cycle. So because of a short fallow period, it became unproductive or unsustainable. Arannok Foundation organized those people and started dialogue, and we tried to solve their problem with nature-based solution. We said that, yeah, we can restore this. Basically, it was a forest landscape restoration program. So we mobilized them to plant trees on the top hill, on the upper part of the hill. In the middle, we said that you go for agroforestry, or it's a kind of permaculture, integrating forest trees with horticultural crops like mango, lychee, and agile marmalade, what is called wood apple. And there were some other species of their choice. In the bottom of the hill, they planted mainly crops, pineapple, lemon. Crops does not mean paddy or other thing, but they planted some annual crop like pineapple, lemon, guava, papaya, and those kind of species. On the stream bank, they planted bamboo. So after over a period of 6 years, we invested in that project about 200,000 or little over 200,000 US dollar. At the end of 8 years, we tried to see what impact it had. Mainly, initially, they started reaping or harvesting fruits from the fruit trees, but gradually, maximum income they started having from bamboo. Now, after 8 years, we made an economic analysis. We found that the investment that were about against 250,000, they were getting now, or they were getting about more than 500,000 a year. Or I would say the value of the product is more than 500,000. I mean, it's almost double the investment after 8 years. After 8 years, it became double. And more importantly, there were wildlife and there were lots of water. I mean, the main output of the investment was water, because that water started giving water for their domestic users as well as growing agricultural crop. So that's the one. And similar program we have used for community conserved area. We have restored degraded site, and they have also the site is really beautiful. I would say that project received international award from ICCCAD, and another project received Energy Globe Award from Australia. I would stop here, and in nutshell, I'm saying that this nature-based solution means we just practice forestry at the top hill, agroforestry in the mid hill. It's a kind of permaculture. In the bottom hill, agroforestry are growing different crops, which gave them economic return. And during this COVID period, they were doing excellent. And another thing that we did, we gave them some seed money, and they had their monthly saving scheme that helped them undertaking different alternative income generating projects. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. If you do have questions, please post them in the chat. And we'll have a chance to discuss them afterwards. So then we have Mirela Gallo from Peru. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Good morning, everybody from here, Peru. My name is Mirela Gallo. I am the project coordinator of the Mountain EBA upscaling project. I want to tell you a bit of our project. The Mountain Ecosystem-Based Adaptation Project has been working since 2013 in the North Yauyos-Cochas Landscape Reserve, designing and implementing EBA measures together with community members with a participatory action research approach. High Andean ecosystems were grasslands and peatlands with the problem of overgrazing. The EBA measures built not only in nature-based solutions themselves, but also unnecessarily strengthening the community organization structure, capacity building, recovering local knowledge, and improving livelihood to increase families' resilience to climate change and other stresses. Those are robust measures. Miraflores community is one of our best experiences, although it was very hard to get a community together and make time to plan the grasslands use, for example. Culture was a good mobilizer because it allowed people to find reasons to recognize themselves as a team and work together. They built green infrastructure to conduct water to a fourth grassland rotating area. They use an ancestral pasture rotation system, making more grassland area available to livestock and reducing overpasture. With healthier ecosystems, more water is expected to infiltrate in the soil and be available during the dry season. The community created standards or norms for managing their communal pasture lands, allowing a restricted number of animals per community member, and using pastures with a great sense of equity. They also increased livestock quality and got organized to keep the cattle grazing no longer than necessary. That increased the animal selling price and the pasture's availability, being economically more convenient to the family's pockets. The Miraflores became one of the most well-organized communities of 19 in the reserve. The community members won opportunities to implement other projects and did a good job working with those projects in the regions. When the pandemic began, people returned from the cities because of the lack of jobs, looking for crops and food. The community members increased in about 30% in number. Some months later, a mechanism for retribution for ecosystem services called Merece here, paid by the water supply company of Cañete city, that is called Emapa Cañete, was planned to be conducted with communities in the upper part of the watershed. The pandemic restricted the available funds, and Emapa decided to implement a pilot Merece. The pilot community was selected using criteria tables by the technicians that work in institutions related to environmental ministry. And due to the organization's strengths, Miraflores was selected as a pilot site. As the pilot site, they did a lot of field work during the pandemic times, and that will help to have more water available during droughts and climate variability changes. This also was another opportunity of jobs for people in the community. I will stay here not in order to be keep the time, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mita. Yeah, thank you for these insightful perspectives from the Mountain EBA project in the Peruvian Andes. Next up, we have Dr. Rahman. Dr. Rahman, are you with us?
Yes.
The floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, I'm Mukhlis Rahman. I work for a national NGO in Bangladesh named CNRS, Center for Natural Resources Studies. I have two hats. I am the executive director, so do some policy activities, but I'm more inclined to field level technical activities. So most of the time I visit. Still, I am in Cox's Bazar. Just completed my day-long visit. But I mean, I just want to share with you two cases. One that we did in 1994, our first project, and that was the ecosystem restoration in floodplain ecosystems to increase the captured fisheries. The problem was in a small place in the central Bangladesh that the floodplain wetland was disconnected from the river due to siltation of connecting canal. So the floodwater hardly could come inside, and then fish migration was blocked. So natural recruitment was disrupted. So as the ecosystem restoration, we actually rehabilitated the canal so that water can come in time in the early monsoon and can bring in good numbers of fish, eggs, young juveniles, adults from river to the floodplains. And actually that happened, and we organized communities and then excavated the canal and engaged communities having some literacy and numeracy skills in monitoring. And we have found at the second year, the 6-fold increase in fish production and 36% increase in fish biodiversity, and also increase in fish consumption at the household level. These are basically, the livelihood and economic things, but also the other aspects is that the local people were engaged in the local development planning. It's a kind of participative process of doing these sort of things. And people got the access to fishing. And their knowledge and skills in floodplain fisheries enhanced. And it's a kind of supporting the collective action. So, and finally, most importantly, is this project back in 27 years generated policy inputs. The government also incorporated habitat restoration. We have also other interventions like seasonal wetland sanctuaries and 2 months fishing closure during the early monsoon to allow fish to breed. So these are actually taken up by the government, and government themselves with their own money designed projects like this. And DFID, USAID, they also designed projects on this ecosystem restoration, including UNDP. The second one is the very recent and still ongoing. It is also in a small area, piloting in the coastal area where salinity is a big problem. And due to soil and water salinity, people can only grow monsoon rice because monsoon rains diluted the salinity concentration. There are many canal networks, but all are grabbed by the shrimp farmers. They're a bit relatively rich people and influential people. However, a part of the abandoned canal we excavated under the project. Idea is to store the rainwater so that it's a fresh water, so that the people can also grow crops during the dry season when salinity is high. And also people can get access to fisheries in this restored canal. And what we have found that, well, I mean, now instead of one crop in the monsoon season, which is monsoon rice, now they can grow 3 crops a year. And there is cropping diversity and the landscape diversity, and people have access to food security, water security, and also income, because the agriculture can engage more laborers than the shrimp farms. During the COVID-19 case, people say that, well, due to lockdown, we couldn't go outside for work. but we had crops, we have rice in the field. So we harvested and we had the food security during the crisis period. So that's also important component of this, or output of this. And I would like to say that the solidarity, these village people have connectivity with the sub-district administration and also the sub-district level advocacy groups. So when they try to get the permission of canal excavation, they need to get government permissions, and for which they need support of the advocacy platform. And they also had to do lots of advocacy campaigns in support of allowing them to excavate the canal and for their food production and water conservation issues. So this, in summary, I mean, these two projects, though small in nature, but generated lots of policy inputs and technical approaches to address the climate and non-climate related shocks and hazards. So I like to stop here. I think my time is over. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. Another insightful local perspective, demonstrating some important synergies. Next up, we have Afsari. Afsari, are you with us?
Yes, Alex. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Bangladesh. I'm Afsari. I'm working for Concern Worldwide Bangladesh office as a program manager. And at the moment, I'm leading a Zurich-funded flood resilience project. So I'd like to start with the building back better with this thing. To me, like, this is a strategy which is actually aiming to reducing the risk of the vulnerable people or the communities who are basically at the front line of climate crisis. And this strategy, through this strategy, we're actually trying to protect them from the future disaster and shocks by making the strategy more inclusive. And I think globally at the moment, all the countries facing the dual challenges. One is like countries are trying to fix or repair the historic damages, that is like greenhouse gas that has already been we are seeing in our environment, and on the other hand trying to adapt with the changes, with the changing the world, or transforming the world. By saying this, I mean that we're trying to adapt with the changes, with the weather events that is happening. And if we look at that, who are the worst affected by the negative impact of the climate change? The answer is, I think, clear to all of us, and it is the poor communities who are suffering most due to the change in weather. In many places, we see that, as Mukhlis Bhai was also saying, that countries growing crops in normal ways is no longer possible, and people are like changing their professions. Lands that they were using once for the crops or vegetable production now is being used for the shrimp or crab cultivation. So if we look at the vulnerable communities of Bangladesh, few specific conditions are coming very strongly. And first, like, there is a mass unemployment that is compounded with also the COVID-19 pandemic. Changing in profession, people are changing their profession, they are changing their livelihood options, they are moving from their own places to other places, like from rural to urban areas for the income opportunities. And each crisis is creating a new poor, compounded with inequality and exclusions. And there's no denying in saying that women are the one who are actually most affected, because when male member of the family, they are leaving the they are actually moving to other places, moving to the urban areas in search of income opportunities, they are leaving behind the women and the children and elderly people, which are putting them another set of vulnerabilities. So I think it is very important that we need to find ways to bring these people back to their own areas, bring back them to the work, and support the adaptation that can build their resilience capacity so that they can really face the challenges that climate change or the weather related events is actually putting on them. And there is certainly need to look at the policies, practices, investment to have economic, environmental, and sustainable solutions. And today, as we're talking about the nature-based solutions, so I think this nature can actually give us the solutions that can provide socio-economic and environmental co-benefits. It can help us to address a variety of environmental, social, and economic challenges in a very sustainable ways. For example, like tree plantation, it it has the ability to store the carbon, protect the riverine habitat from flood, cyclone, and also have the economic value, and it can also positively contribute to human health and well-being. If we pick up another example like green vegetation at the river bank, because you might be hearing that these days the riverine communities, they are really facing the problems of river erosions, and the land or the whatever little asset they have, they are actually losing because of this river erosion, and it is actually forcing them to actually move from that places, and their plea, I think there's no word to actually explain that, or no words can actually let us understand until and unless we don't go through that situation. So the green vegetations at the riverbank can not only support in soil binding, but it can also use for feed and fodder for the livestock and other purposes. Because, you know, when there's like flooding in the communities and or waterlogging, we see that there are huge prices of the feed and fodders. And if we see in the rural communities, most of the people are actually dependent on, like most of the people, they are actually engaged in rearing the livestock. And for them, it is very important to actually that these livestock remains healthy and they are remain productive. But when there is a crisis of the feed and fodder, it is very difficult because this cattle doesn't actually they become very weak, and they don't produce as much milk as is expected, and sometimes certainly that there's a disease attacks, and even selling these livestock does not generate enough profit. So we can understand with the small solutions we can actually solve many problems. So similarly, if we talk about the wetland management, this can also provide economic opportunity for the, especially for the fisheries communities, and also have the co-benefit of protecting biodiversity and ecosystem. We all know that Sundarban, which is the world's largest mangrove forest, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, it is providing both a livelihood for the local people and is the world's most renowned biodiversity, and also work as a shield for the severe cyclone and storms for the coastal peoples. But due to salinity intrusion in the cultivable lands, people living in the coastal areas who once were solely dependent on agricultural activities now depending on the Sundarban. This means the resources of the Sundarbans, they are over extracting, and that is another set of actually crisis. And I think we are, there is not much effort, there's not much initiative or investment to restore the Sundarban resources or keep it intact in a way so that it can keep on giving us the services or to people who are depending on it. And there should be a strategy that can actually stop the over exploitation of the of these natural resources. So from these examples, I think it is really clear that how these nature-based solutions or natural resources or natural capitals are actually giving us the co-benefit. And we are living at a time when socio-economic and environmental challenges such as increased urbanization, economic inequalities, climate change, loss of biodiversity, ecosystems, these are very obvious. And therefore, I think that biodiversity and natural infrastructure such as forest, wetland, and mangrove ecosystems are essential inputs for many economic activities and are central to livelihood of maybe hundreds and millions of people. And this means natural ecosystems are essential pillar for resilience. Yet most of the natural capitals are undervalued or valued only as a harvestable commodity. And as I said earlier, less effort for restoration. But in reality, nature is demanding investments so that we can get utmost benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this rich perspective on the Sundarbans and other landscapes in Bangladesh. Thank you. I'd now like to shift the discussion back to Peru and invite Florencia Zapata. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Do you copy me well? Good.
Yes.
My name is Florence Zapata from Instituto de Montaña, working on the nature-based solution initiative in Peru. Since last year, we are conducting a multi-case study on economic recovery potential on NBS, comprising 9 cases, 5 at local level and 4 at national level. And I would like to share with you some preliminary insights as the research is still going on. We are analyzing 8 dimensions, 4 of them on the short-term economic goals, such as employment, livelihood diversification, productivity, and income. But we are also looking at the long-term development goals, such as equity, food and water security, climate change adaptation, and we are also looking at trade-off. At the national level, we are looking at cases mostly conducted by the state, like the national system on protected area, and also the projects for water security and grassland and forest management. At the local level, we are looking at cases on diverse areas in the country, both in the Amazon, the highlands, and the coast. What we are finding from this multi-case study is that looking at employment, for example, national cases provide solid evidence for their potential for the generation of green employment, both permanent jobs of personnel and temporary jobs. The local cases also give evidence for this dimension, but the extent of their impact for employment generation is logically smaller than the national cases. And it is important to highlight the employment information from the national cases, not only because they provide thousands of employment, but also because this NBS at the national level, promoted and led by the state, keep going on even during the worst phases of the crisis. On the other hand, small local NBS sometimes stop during the crisis, but the state continue working, and they also help to distribute support to the remote communities in the rural areas. That's a key information coming from the study. Regarding livelihoods, there is evidence shows that all local cases have contributed to boosting local livelihoods and their diversification, either through development of new productive activities or by a strengthening of the existing one. At the national level, there is lack of data and evidence on this dimension, but information coming from the implementers and local stakeholders show contributions to this dimension also. The same on the productivity and income. All local cases help to improve local productivity and income, significant improvements in agriculture and livelihood productivity, forestry, agroforestry, and fishery, and also tourism. And the same with national cases. Although we don't have evidence on these dimensions, information coming from both implementer and local stakeholders support this. And it is important that both implementer and local stakeholders stress the close relationship between the long-term development goals, such as water and food security or climate change adaptation, to the economic impacts that help them to improve their situation during the crisis. For example, water security helps to boost productivity and livelihood diversification, but on the other hand, by focusing on nature and sustainable development, all cases confirm the potential of NBS not only to support economic recovery, but also a resilient recovery. And that's the key part of the information coming from the study, because these NBS not only help the communities to face and go through this crisis, but also to be prepared for future crises such as climate change. And this is something that is very well highlighted during the study. finally, I would like to say that all cases also highlighted the importance of participation, local participation of people through not just during the implementation, but also during the design and monitoring and evaluation of cases. That is important to guarantee local ownership and sustainability. And that is something that we found both at the local cases and the national cases too. And well, I am thank you for the opportunity for sharing these preliminary results, and happy to give more information if there are questions about them.
Thank you, Florence. Yeah, that was a fantastic overview across a wonderful set of case studies in different ecosystems in Peru at different scales, really highlighting the contribution to economic recoveries. I would like to now go back to Bangladesh for another national perspective. Tasfa, do we have Dr. Nahar on the call? Dr.
Yes,
Nahar, hi, fantastic.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you. The floor is yours. I believe you're going to talk about the national perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to give my views. I'm Nur Nahar. I'm working as Joint Chief in Bangladesh Planning Commission here in Dhaka. Thank you for inviting me. And so to make things easy, I would just like to highlight how the concept of nature-based solution is reflected in our national plans. As you know, Bangladesh government follows the planned way of development both in the public and private sector. And in Planning Commission, we deal with the public sector investment, formulating the national plans, the medium to long term, and also formulating the investment plans to fulfill the objectives of those national plans. And it covers a broad array of goals, targets that the political government would like to achieve. And I'm very, I think, benefited by the previous speakers, their insights into some real projects on the nature-based solutions. And so I do not have real on the job experience on the nature-based solution projects or activity. But what I'd like to say that this is reflected in various ways in our national plans. So I just would like to focus on two or three, very briefly, three of our documents, so that our audience may know how we do our planning. In the macro level, we have the 5-year plans. For example, we implemented the 7th 5-year plan since our independence. So in that plan, nature-based solution was not there explicitly, but its elements, like the speakers have mentioned, the various issues were there, and the focus was on some in the environment, and also disaster management, and also climate change adaptation. Although nature-based solution was not specifically mentioned, so the various factors that are included in the NBS, in the formal definition, were there, although there was no direct mention. And the plan focused on poverty alleviation, like we have heard in this session, that we need to about the poverty alleviation issues and how we have to do the economic development along with protecting our environment and taking care of our society's needs. And that 7th 5-year plan gave importance to food security, improved rural infrastructure, sanitation. And even interestingly, it did have a green building code, introduced the green building code in our national building code. For the first time after long several years of analysis, the government introduced the building code policy that included the green concepts. So that will bring some greening into our infrastructure development, building, construction in there. But that is not the whole of the, of course, NBS. But I would say that was a start. And after the 7th five-year plan that ended in 2020, we adopted the 8th five-year plan, another 5-year plan. And there the NBS was specifically mentioned. So that is the progress, because by this time we are getting the views from the experts, some experience from the ground, some results of the projects from various studies, like various or NGOs or other some departments. And so this concept was included as a strategy in the 8th five-year plan, and it is mentioned that Bangladesh government will do the National Adaptation Plan, the NAP. So I think you are all familiar with the NAP. That is one of the like an obligation, you may say, from the the UN climate change convention framework. So also Bangladesh is accordingly formulating the NAP document, and it's finalizing it by this year. And there the nature-based solution concept is addressed in various, I think, themes or chapters. And so that was one of the important directives of our 8th five-year plan. And also our 8th five-year plan highlighted inclusivity and emphasized on water resource management, especially in those ecological critical areas of the Chittagong Hill Tracts. In the south east, we have the Chittagong Hill Tracts that are very sensitive in environment ecosystems. And it highlighted on erosion management and restoring and protecting water-related ecosystems in the country. Again, it also highlighted the green building rating system, and also instructed that various the relevant departments, to assess the buildings, construction of the buildings against a set of green criteria that will recognize the environmental performance. So for the first time, the sector does that. The infrastructure has to think about the greening of the infrastructures, the environmental issues in total. Although we have the environment impact assessment as an act or as a regulation and department in our country, but that is more like I would say just like following a policy or like a regulation issue, rather than as a holistic way of thinking of the nature. So although we have the Department of Environment is there, Department of Forest is there, or Department of Disaster Management is there, so they are following the regulation or implementing the government's regulations in those thematic areas. So I think the nature-based solution, ideas, concepts, and some indicators, and also some, if we can have some policies to monitor nature-based solutions in our macro level documents, that it will also guide the thematic policies in the climate change adaptation or disaster management. We have a very good structure for the disaster management, and we are doing the climate change adaptation and mitigation. So I think there we can have more contribution to make it more holistic rather than just thinking of separate policies. So if we can have the NBS in our big five-year plans, then we will have, we can introduce them easily into our sectoral policies and plans. And I would like to mention that we have a long-term plan, the Delta plan, that also it is a very scenario-based planning, and it gives emphasis on the creation of green coastal areas and protection of those coastal areas and restoration and conservation of natural reservoirs. So, and it is like step-by-step process in the Delta Plan, thinking Bangladesh as a big delta. So of course it is taking into consideration the nature and the water resource, how water is very important in our country. It's the way in all the sectors, for our agriculture, for our irrigation, food security, and overall protecting the ecosystems, livelihoods and everything. So in the Delta Plan, I would say the nature-based solution idea or the projects or investments are kind of, it's pointing towards that, but maybe we can have some more specific indicators and have specific suggestion how to monitor these investments or projects. So I think, as I mentioned, so these are the macro level plans in our country, and how we are gradually shifting or trying to incorporate the NBS in our planning systems, plan documents. And I think I would like to end with mentioning that the challenge is like having a monitoring framework, because rather than having another strategy for an NBS, it should be mainstreamed or integrated in our existing plans. And the missing element, I think, is the how to monitor them. So, the NBS, I think, encompasses the whole development framework. Like we think about the economic development, our environment, and the society. But then how do we monitor that a good NBS activity or project, and how do we incorporate the results, successful results, into a future NBS activity, and the government will know, okay, this will be a viable solution, a viable project, investment. At the same time, thinking of poverty alleviation, thinking of GDP growth, and at the same time, protecting our nature or using our nature to increase the GDP growth. So we need to work on those, I think, monitoring activities and have some good indicators in our monitoring framework. We have a monitoring framework for a 5-year plan. So if you can have those indicators there, I think that will help the policymakers to look into the nature-based solution activities. So I'd like to end here, and maybe I can add something later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this reminder that we need a holistic focus on nature-based solutions, integrated policy making, and the need to link the practice or the local and the national scales is very important in tracking NBS. So now we have I think last but not least, we have a global perspective from Rakibul Amin. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I will start where Ms. Nur Nahar finishes, that need for a standardized monitoring and reporting framework. This is what IUCN has been advocating. So a standardized definition of NBS, and also a standard, what we call an NBS, because it's been defined very differently by different players. I mean, there are examples. That's one of the I would say nuances when something has become a buzzword in the global discussion. So NBS also had that what you call transformation. So one of the good thing happened is, if I say that IUCN's definition, the definition I can read out: actions to protect, sustainably manage and restore natural or modified ecosystem that addresses societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefit. Interesting that United Nations Environmental Assembly 5, there was a resolution passed, and there was a universal definition of NBS has been adopted. And let me read it. It says, actions to protect, conserve, restore, sustainably use and manage natural and modified terrestrial, freshwater, coastal and marine ecosystem, which addresses social, economic and environmental challenges effectively and adaptively, while simultaneously providing human well-being ecosystem services. and resilience and biodiversity benefit. So it's almost mimicking the definition of IUCN. And so once we have that, what you call a universal definition is adopted, then it's easy to roll out, the actions and programs. And for that, IUCN developed a global standard, what you can call NBS, or other. It's not a what you call a straitjacket, like this is NBS, this is not NBS. It's rather a standard to see what are the level of nature and people. The main essence of NBS is there, and we also have what you call a screening tool. This is very much what has been the previous speakers have been saying, the standardization of a standardized monitoring and reporting framework, what we call a project or an action, how much it's faring in terms of the definition we are saying, the NBS. Just to understand this, nature is part of the development. This notion is not new, but the term NBS is new. It's in a conscious approach to bring back nature in the development discourse. We had Brundtland Commission. There was environmentalism, there's CBD and all of this art summit. So, but still, the nature was degrading at a rate. If you take it now, the latest IPBS Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the latest report saying there's 1 million species under threat, which is based on IUCN's red list calculation. So that is not been highlighted. There are a lot of discussion going on with climate change. We must do it, but we also must understand we're having a double crisis of biodiversity loss, which is reinforcing climate change and then also losing solutions for climate change. And that biodiversity is a very fabric of life. So the NBS is trying to engage these development discourse or development pathways where nature can has a positive impact. So what the other speakers have mentioned, I don't think I can add anything more, because what is I'm hearing from Peru and both from Bangladesh is kind of encapsulate what is happening, what is a discussion at the globe. There are, nature-based solution is not necessarily only about nature. It's IUCN is also, and also the discourse is having going on. I'm just reading just an example I can give. There's a draft policy brief, you can search it. IUCN FIBA is a French for ecosystem-based adaptation, and the Technical Executive Committee of UNCCC Nairobi Work Program has published, and there are several examples of innovative solutions. And one of them, I'll just for the sake of time, I'll just mention one, to give room to the rivers. And especially it's true for a country like Bangladesh or any delta like in Netherlands, where there's lots of seawalls or dikes has been developed. But it's increasingly there are evidence that if you give room to the river, it restored the natural flood to better manage peak river discharges. The same thing happens in other places like backwater restoration. So it's a blue, green, gray, green, blue solution for, and interesting. And the title of today's webinar is Building Economic Case. We knew it's not unknown that what is the value of ecosystems. Like, for example, 1 year degradation is 2.2 to 4.5 trillion loss per year, according to Costanza water-related ecosystem services, valued at 29 trillion per year. We have those values. The question is how you influence policies, how you influence the private sector, the government, and even the personal choices to integrate those values because nature has always been discounted. I'll just finish with the last example is from Ecuador. The city of Quito in Ecuador provides an example of sustainable funding, and that is very important in the nature-based solution discourse. What is a sustainable financial model we are talking about? So the city population by 2025 will reach comes under 4 million, huge increase, and recognizing the watershed vital for its development. The municipality, the government, and the NGO provided a seed funding to form Water Protection Fund for Quito, or FONAC. The water users pay for the fund depending on the water consumption, and there's a company who manages that, and they also, invest in protecting the ecosystem, the watershed, the mountain forest. So it's a kind of a perfect example where you have investing in nature, which again generates benefits, which you can monetize and you can reinvest in protecting the nature. So when we talk about nature-based solution, scale is important. Many of the examples we have had it's very good at the local scale, but when we say nature-based solution and to make it visible at how we can scale it up at the national or maybe the sub-basin or the basin level, that is important. I think this is where we have to do a lot of work, and forum like this is definitely beneficial. So I'll stop here. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this global perspective. Thank you, and the work of the IUCN and leading the standard on nature-based solutions. Tasfia, if I understand correctly, we'll open up the floor for discussions and questions, or should I give my summary first?
Yes. Before you summarize, I just would like to say that many thanks to the audience and participants, because I see that questions are coming, and also many of our panelists have already addressed many of your questions. Just 2 questions are left unanswered. And I believe those questions are basically for Moklesur sir. So Mokles sir, if you're here, I would like to read through all those questions to you, if you're okay. Mokles sir?
Yeah, perhaps in the interest of time, if there is some overlap with other questions, they could also be answered in writing. Is that right?
Those are not answered already, and those are not overlapped.
Yeah.
And basically particularly for Mokles sir. So Mokles sir, are you here with us?
Yeah, I just can give answer to the first question, like the fisherman is still fishing in the banned period or prohibited period. Actually, the conservation and engagement is something different. It's very complex things. Here in the conservation process, I see absence of human face. I mean, the protection entities actually, they follow very strict rules, but they don't look at the issues and problems of the poor fishing communities. And why do they go to fishing? Because they need to survive. And they had to pass through the COVID situation. And now they need some options, some opportunities. But the compensation package that we have from the government is 40 kilograms of rice per family during the ban period per month. But the number of fishers are very high. And there are also some, I would say, the political fishermen. They are not fishermen, but due to, through political negotiation, they are enrolled as fishermen. So the amount of rice allocated in a particular union or upazila or sub-district is not adequate to provide the 40 kilogram of rice support to every family. And only rice support is not the livelihoods, because they need many other things to survive. So that's how they, I mean, some of them go to fishing, and it needs a kind of participatory approach, that how better we could ensure these protection measures. I think that is important. It's a big question though. However, they agreed that due to this prohibition, the fish production is increased, and we also know that. The last question is to me was how this cropping diversity and food security is connected. Definitely connected, the way I understand that. Like the area I'm talking about, the coastal area where they used to produce only one rice, monsoon rice, but now they have wheat, they have winter rice, they have summer rice, and wide array of vegetables. So they get at least two crops of rice. So that actually ensured food security. And when they get wheat, it is kind of intermediate crop. Before harvesting the rice, they get the wheat. So they get the early food security. And definitely cropping diversity increase the dietary diversity of the people in the coastal area where agricultural production is very minimum. So yeah, I mean, if Mr. Hafiz is interested, maybe we can bilaterally talk and elaborate the case to him to have better understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Shall we move to the broader discussion, Saskia?
Yes. You please do a very quick summary so that it opens up the floor to the audience. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do my best. That was because we had a lot of contributions. The goal of this session was to, frame what building back better means in the context of economic recoveries, and what the contribution of nature-based solutions are to economic recoveries. And to start with, we've heard, so through these discussions across scales, we've unpacked some really informative evidence from the ground on how investments in nature directly deliver economic impact. So, for instance, Farid told us that an initial investment in $200,000, I believe, through a forest landscape restoration program, ultimately translated into a doubling of the investment in terms of its value, the value of the products after 8 years. So from increasing fruit harvesting, and so investments in nature, we've heard, can contribute to income and jobs and economic security and livelihood diversification, but they also deliver economic impact through impacts on ecosystem services. So for instance, in our last presentation, we heard about the role of nature-based solutions in watershed and sustaining water provisioning. So that is another pathway for the delivery of economic impact. But we, in our discussions, I think it's become very clear that one can't purely talk about economic impact through a narrow lens. I think it's clear that the discussion needs to speak about economic impact more broadly within an environment and through an environment and development lens. And an important point was made that ultimately what matters also is how resilient this economic recovery is. So a point emphasized by Florencia. What is the contribution of nature-based solutions in supporting a resilient recovery? And that sort of emphasizes the need to have a short-term as well as a long-term focus. Another important theme was the role of communities, of local communities, and supporting nature-based solutions. That ultimately, for the solution to deliver benefits, it needs to speak to the needs, the interests, and the capacities of local actors. And ultimately, that is how basically, in a nutshell, tailoring solutions to this social, both the social and the environmental context, and the people that are embedded in that context is absolutely key to deliver economic outcomes, but also benefits for ecosystems. And we also heard about the importance of making sure that this evidence is used in advocacy to influence national level policy. And so maintaining this bridge between the local and the national, the subnational and the national is absolutely essential. So there was evidence from, for example, from Dr. Rahman that in Bangladesh, evidence from projects on the ground, if I understood correctly, has supported advocacy to influence policy. And then we had a very interesting overview of the complexity of national level policy making in Bangladesh in relation to the national action plans and efforts to mainstream nature-based solutions across these, with the key message to ensure an integrated focus in policy planning, to have cross-cutting plans across sectors to create the basis by which sectoral plans are then informed. And importantly, also is the need to have monitoring and evaluation systems which work across scales to inform policy, but also track the impact of policy. And just to finish, Rakibul Amin explained to us that introduced the IUCN standard on nature-based solutions, emphasizing that it can provide this architecture for such a framework through its 8 criteria, which are all based on the NBS definition, which then influenced, which is largely the basis for this NBS definition in the recent UN Assembly resolution. So yeah, just to come back, I mean, what we're talking about here is the importance of investments in nature, not only to address climate change and biodiversity, but to support economic agendas. But I think what's important is also to realize that there are potentially different perspectives on what economic recovery should mean and how nature-based solutions can contribute to that. So one question I wanted to pose to the audience and sorry, to the panel is, going back at this, what I was saying at the start, often what we think of economic recoveries in terms of a narrow economic impact. And that's absolutely essential. So we need to understand the impact on employment, income, and gross added value. But the vision for the recovery, as I think our discussions make clear, is likely to be framed differently by different sets of stakeholders. So for instance, we heard about the importance of subsistence livelihoods in supporting human well-being. And so there are different frames, if you will, of economic recovery. And so my question is, how do we ensure that the way economic recoveries are framed at the national scale respond to the local needs and aspirations of people on the ground? Is there common ground here? How do we make sure that the focus on, for example, generating employment short-term and income is also supportive of local livelihoods, livelihood diversification, and resilience? So hopefully that sets the scene for an insightful discussion. And then I have a couple of more questions to also discuss more about the Peru context. Thank you. So anybody can step in at this stage.
I'm Dr. Mokles. Dr. Rahman, can I just answer to another question I see in the chat box?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing all this simultaneously. So if you feel there is Yeah, please go ahead and answer that question, and then perhaps we could kickstart a broader discussion around what I suggested.
Yeah, there is a question that, well, I'm probably posted by Beth Kaplan. He or she talked about non-native species to erosion protection and soil stabilization, given the example in Rwanda. In the case that we follow here, I mean, in the Rohingya camps in Cox's Bazar, we also have been doing the ecosystem restoration through nature-based solutions approaches, like, the planting native species and rehabilitation of the stream systems. Here, basically, we use the species list approved by the Bangladesh Forest Department based on the local suitability and indigenous species. That's we follow. And in the wetland systems, where some species in certain wetlands are extirpated or near to extinction, but in that case, we actually release or reintroduce those species collecting from nearby wetland systems. So they are actually local fish, local species. Because of different reasons and huge fishing pressures, some species are extirpated. So I don't think that the exogenous species, non-native species, is a good solution. Is the nature-based solutions, and I also don't support the privatization and commercialization, because if people come and say, well, this is wetland, better we release commercial species and then get good price and good production. But I don't think that is not nature-based solutions. And introducing exotic species is not. So we need to do with our indigenous local species and involving the local and valuing the local knowledge. So I think I answered the question of Mr. Kaplan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very important contribution. And just before I leave the floor to others, we can also discuss this issue as well. And it's in its relation to, I think it does tie in well to the discussion on what economic recovery means. But yes, I think if for those of you familiar with the IUCN standard, that point is quite explicit. We've also emphasized it in our policy guidance here at the Nature-Based Solutions Initiative with our partners in Peru and Bangladesh, that there is a lot of evidence to demonstrate that species that are exotic and not well adapted to the local context can lead to significant trade-offs with, for example, trade-offs between wood provisioning and water security. And even in the case of wood provisioning, there is evidence to demonstrate that forest plantations that are largely monocultures and in some cases non-native species are less resilient to the impacts of climate change. I will say no more because it's not for me to talk, it's for the panelists. But that's an important point. So yeah, what should we do, Tasfi? Should we have a discussion around around that, or?
As we have 15 minutes left, and we have Dr. Hawk with us, so he can share his couple of remarks, and then we can, and if after
Yeah.
if any other panelists can get 1 minute each to share their reflection, and then we can close this thing that way. That would be better.
Yeah, that would be useful. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Dr. Hawk, hope you can hear us.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
The floor is yours. I hope you have heard the summary that Alex made after our 7 speakers, 5 from Bangladesh, 2 from Peru, who all have shared their local, national, and global perspectives on investing into nature-based solutions to economic recovery. And the floor is yours that how we can take this message to COP and to other global discussion. Dr. Hawk, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. I managed to catch, I think, the last 3 or 4 presentations and also Alex's excellent summary as well. So let me first of all thank the organizers for organizing this session and for the speakers for sharing their very informative and interesting case studies. I will mention three challenges that I see for those of us who wish to promote nature-based solutions going forward. The first challenge is the terminology. It is genuinely unfamiliar to many people. When I raise nature-based solutions in conversations with engineers or economists, I get a lot of pushback saying, we don't know what that means. Tell us what that means in our terms. And we do need to think about that. It's not a trivial question. Engineers need to understand what nature-based solutions are in their terms. Economists need to understand it in their terms. That's one challenge, is terminology, new terminology to people for whom it is new, and explaining it in a way that uses their metrics of understanding, not our metrics of understanding, their metrics. And so finding that common language, it's not impossible, but I think the onus is on us to be better at finding that common language with other disciplines in particular. The second challenge I see is that a lot of the examples that I've seen and the ones that were presented here today are good illustrations of local level success stories. Now, local success stories are absolutely fine and good, and I'm a promoter of locally led adaptation and locally led nature-based solutions. So these are absolutely the right thing to do. But the challenge is, how do we go to scale? Just a few local pockets of good examples are no longer enough. We need to be thinking the scaling up of from those examples. And scaling up requires some radical thinking. How do we scale up? Well, who do we need to get involved in scaling up? It is really outside our comfort zone in terms of taking the idea from a small example to saying, now this can be replicated 100 times, 1,000 times bigger. Can we really do that? And if so, how do we do that? So a challenge for us, and I'm mentioning all of these as our own challenges for us who want to do advocacy on behalf of nature-based solutions, to be better at explaining it in terms for other people, at showing how it can be scaled up, not just showing some good small examples from different countries, useful as they are. I'm not saying they're not useful. I'm just saying that they're not enough. And then the final challenge for all of us is to do things faster. At the pace at which we are going, we are losing the battle. The nature is being destroyed faster than we are restoring or protecting it. And so we need to get better at scaling up, at doing it faster, and engaging with non-converts, people who don't understand, and that's being generous, and people who don't like, who oppose what we are doing. There are denialists who will say we're talking rubbish. What do we do with them? How do we challenge them? And so I think we need to get much, much better at dealing with adversaries rather than preaching to the converted. This webinar is preaching to the converted. We all agree. We're all sharing good examples. We're all, very happy to do that. But we're in a small minority. We are not really affecting the larger picture yet. We need to. We need to set ourselves a bigger ambition of how do we actually affect the larger interest. So that brings me to my final point, which, as we have set ourselves a task in all of our sessions in the Gobeshona conference to think about COP27. What is it that we would like to see happen there? And I would say there are two things that we need to think about. Firstly, the adoption of nature-based solutions as a good thing happened in COP26. Okay, that was very much accepted. But what do we actually do to make it happen is the big challenge. And I think what we need to do is to harness our evidence from around the world and go to COP27 or even before COP27, engage with the decision makers, the negotiators, and explain to them the how it is best for them in their terms. And then again, speak their language, not insist on them learning our language. They may have to learn nature-based solutions, but the explanation has to be done in language that they would understand. And then encourage them to adopt decisions at the COP level on how to implement it. And those decisions can then be taken forward by the international funding agencies who are funding climate change activities, both mitigation as well as adaptation, and national governments who also are funding activities at the national level. So I think these are two major target groups whose decision-making we need to be influencing by demonstrating to them the advantages in their terms of what we are calling nature-based solutions and explain it to them in a way that they will understand in their own terms. So that's the challenge I see to all of us. And I include myself in setting that challenge for myself and for all of us collectively to up our game. We have to up our game. We're not, we can't be niche actors anymore, doing our own thing in our own places, nice little projects here and there. We just have to go beyond that. We have to add value, add scale, and cut across boundaries. So I think, one of the good things about this particular seminar is we had examples from Peru and Bangladesh, completely different contexts, completely different continents, completely different ecosystems, but nevertheless, a lot of common interest there, a lot of common things that I mentioned, I feel will be common in both places. And so how do we join forces and get better at getting nature-based solutions adopted? And the final point I'll make on the IUCN standard, absolutely essential. The IUCN have done a great job by giving us a definition, giving us a standard that we can now utilize and make it into an implementable standard for everybody. So I'll stop there. Hand back to you, Tasfia and Alex.
Thank you so much for these very important points. Yes, I think by now it should be clear that transformative change is fundamentally social. So these are crucially important points in relation to how to engage with stakeholders and coalition building with unfamiliar or even unlikely partners as a key part of promoting the agenda. And then the importance of course, not only understanding how to scale up, but how to effectively demonstrate and communicate the evidence of nature-based solutions being scaled up. So I'll leave it at that because I think we're almost out of time, and I wanted to give the panelists an opportunity to say a few last words, and please be very brief to give everybody a chance. So we can start from the beginning. I believe that would be Farid. Thank you.
It's 1 minute each in the interest of time. Dr. Farid?
Farid, are you with us? No, if not, then we can move to Mirela, and then we'll go back if Farid is.
Yes, thank you. Upscaling, it's a very interesting topic. We need to do this. I'm not sure. In our project, we are working with the Global Climate Fund in order to upscale the EVA measures and approach in all the south of our country. I'm not sure if this will work because of the different approach that has the ministries. Ministries of Agriculture and Environment will join this upscaling project, but I'm still wondering if this is possible because they're very different approach. That's from my side for now. I have to you.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I think community-based or locally led NBS or adaptation has a limit because we need to work with the agricultural systems, water systems, fisheries systems, and the land use systems, where national policy and instruments have a kind of control. So we need to focus at both ends, the community mobilization, sensitization, and organizations, build consensus, as well as we need to work at the central level, the policy level, to patronize and support the NBS to be implemented and effective at the field level. And definitely scaling is possible. As Dr. Salim said, I think you could remember, Dr. Salim, that a small work in Dholeshwari Basin we did in 10 hectares of area, but later with US aid support with your organization, and we are actually implementing the same type of things in 12,000 hectares of wetlands. But that needs, the collective action and government's engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, fantastic. And I'm sorry, do you have any final thoughts?
Yes, I would like to say that there is a need to develop evidence base for the effective nature-based solutions in terms of context, efficiency, and cost-effective solution. And it certainly needs to be done in conjunction with the stakeholders. And to be successful, the solutions must be adapted to local conditions. And along with this, I think this is also important that the evidence base should also address the limits to nature-based solutions. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Very important points, the limits of nature-based solutions, something we hope to address in our conference here at the initiative over the summer. I'll post a link in the chat. And Florencia, do you have any final thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Very food for thought during this panel. And I would like to highlight one additional finding that I didn't mention. It is that NBS helps to leverage public and private funding. This is something we found in Peru in several cases when there is a development of NBS at the local level, but also at the national level, funding goes to that solution. And that is key for sustainability and upscaling. It means that although it is true, there is a lot of denials, as Dr. Hook said, there is also a lot of people looking for opportunities to support NBS. And this is something that we also need to promote, how to leverage public and private funding through NBS. This is a very good opportunity also. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Leveraging funding and connecting it to the places where it needs to go. Absolutely. So it's again about finance and connecting people. That's fantastic. Let's see, who do we have next? I believe we have Dr. Nahar. Do you have any final thoughts?
I think we lost.
Okay, then we can just go and to our to Rakibul. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Dr. Salimullah mentioned, that the scale is an issue, which I also mentioned, the definition, and the cross-cultural, cross-sectoral, and cross-disciplinary research and dialogue. These are all important. I'll give you just three examples. I had an opportunity to work in the mangrove coastal ecosystem management from Pakistan to the west, to say Indonesia on the east, and Vietnam to the north, to Maldives in the south. Interestingly, all the issues in mangrove destruction, mangrove issues, almost the same. And the solutions, despite whether it's a democratic or a communist country, is almost the same. It's basically the governance and the rights issue. So when we are discussing about the NBS, these are the central issues that we have been discussing for years and after years. And then the question is why we can still find a solution. Today, this morning, we were discussing about the sub-basin level in the Meghna Basin, transboundary cooperation. And one of the issue we discussed is sub-basin level. I mean, two country at the GSA level or just a national level. But what about the sub-national, the district level? Can we kind of a decentralization of power and more community to community, province to province interaction? It's still possible. Maybe this is what we need, upscale and downscale. And we're also having a discussion with the economists and forester to build a economic case for NBS. What is the benefits of restoration? There is hardly any paper. So we also need to build this. And finally, on the NBS, there are some criticism as well, especially coming from South America, from the indigenous community group, that it is a kind of rights issue, the space issue. So we also need to understand those perspectives. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely critical to different perspectives on nature-based solutions and the challenges around framing and power. I just want to quickly go back to Farid. Farid, are you with us for any final words? If not, then we can wrap up, Tasvia, I think.
Yes, we have another session happening from 8, so I guess we have to now. So thank you all the panelists, all of our audience, Alex for moderating this perfectly, and Dr. Hawk as well for guiding us through the session. I would like to thank the whole Gobeshona conference team and our amazing IT team for the amazing support that they have done, and the rapporteurs